Hi everyone. I want to demonstrate what I mean when I say I want you to present an article briefly to the class by explaining one of the articles from your reading list, the one by Michaela Dewar and colleagues published in Cognitive Neuropsychology in 2011. So in the background, we know that people tend to remember the beginning and end of a set of items better than they remember the middle of a set of items. They do this regardless of whether they're asked to try to remember these things in order or whether they're allowed to recall them in any order that they want. Better memory for the items at the beginning of a list is known as the primacy effect, and the superior memory for items at the end of the list is known as the recency effect. Dewar and colleagues were especially interested in understanding what it is that causes the primacy effect, and we think that these things could be caused by two different mechanisms. These two effects are taken as evidence that there are at least two different systems contributing to maintaining information. In the laboratory, we can reduce the recency effect through various manipulations. For instance, we might insert more time between the end of the studied set of items and the chance to recall, and this will reduce the recency effect. We also could introduce irrelevant sensory stimuli that share features with the studied items that you're meant to remember, and this could also reduce the recency effect. However, these kinds of manipulations don't have any effect on primacy. It's still participants recall the beginning of the list items better even after a delay, and even if there's something interfering with memory for the items during the delay. So that's one thing that suggests that a different mechanism could produce the primacy effect from whatever it is that's producing the recency effect. That still leaves us wondering why it is that the primacy effect occurs. So there are a few possibilities, but we'll focus on the one that Dewar et al. Investigated. That possibility is that participants have more chances to rehearse the early presented items than the middle or the later presented items. It would go something like this. The idea is that while information is presented, you're already preparing to remember it by, in this case, speaking it aloud or thinking it in a way that's similar to speaking it aloud in your head. So you hear one word that you're meant to remember, and while you're waiting for the next word to be spoken, you say that word aloud to yourself over and over again. Then the second word that you're to be remembering is presented, and then you say those two words over and over again to yourself. Now, there's only a couple seconds in between the presentation of each word, so as you're getting to dozens of words to remember, you can't say them all to yourself over and over again. But in between each presentation, you say a few of the words to yourself over and over again, and that might boost memory for those words that you've rehearsed. So the idea then is that the words at the beginning of the list, you've had more of an opportunity to say them over and over again to yourself, and so that's what's causing them to be remembered better. Dewar et al. Tested this idea by finding a patient with severe amnesia, patient DA. Now, when patient DA was asked to remember these words without any sort of assistance or instruction, patient DA did not do this kind of rehearsal that normal participants tend to do. And though patient DA showed a recency effect similar to that shown by a control sample, DA didn't show a primacy effect. So Dewar et al. Thought, well, what if we could implement something that mimicked a typical rehearsal process? Then what would DA's serial position curve look like? Would she show both a recency and a primacy effect like the control participants do? So in their second experiment, Dewar and colleagues got DA to perform they implemented a read aloud procedure that was meant to mimic a typical rehearsal procedure. So after presentation of each word that was meant to be remembered, a word would appear on the screen that would be one of the words that had already been presented, and participants were meant to read this aloud. So this didn't require any memory, really. You just look at the screen and read the words that were presented. But you would get more words from the beginning of the list than from the end of the list because there's more opportunity for those words to be presented. So when they did this, they then looked at DA's serial position curve compared to controls again. And now, with this procedure in place, DA shows a primacy effect like the control participants do. So with this rehearsal strategy, DA went from having no primacy effect to having a primacy effect and a recency effect similar to that observed in control participants. Now, this doesn't prove that the primacy effect is caused by this rehearsal, but it does suggest that speaking the early words aloud more frequently than the middle or later words is part of what causes the primacy effect in free recall.